Greetings, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the 1347 podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Holly. Our episode today is dedicated to executive protection in healthcare, keeping your healthcare executives safe in a dynamic and diverse world. In the wake of the recent murder of United Healthcare CEO, Mr. Brian Thompson, first of all, may his memory be a blessing, and condolences go out to his family and loved ones. Over the last few months, our law enforcement liaison division of Texas Oversight has received a few inquiries from healthcare organizations and compliance individuals wanting to know best practices and the items that go along with the establishment of an appropriate executive protection team if that was not something already within their organization. Bottom line, they're wanting to know how to keep their principals, how to keep their leaders, their executives safe. First of all, executive protection is an occupational skill that requires years of experience and acquired capabilities. These are extremely talented and well-qualified men and women who engage in the operational equities, as we call it, of executive protection on a daily basis. Many of these individuals are former U.S. Secret Service agents, diplomatic security service agents, police officers, government and military-related occupational personnel. Many of these individuals I've worked with over the years as a government agent and a senior executive responsible for numerous cabinet-level dignitaries requiring some form of executive protection, and many are still in my professional network today, and a few of them I still call close and dear friends. This episode is dedicated to a few important administrative components necessary to formulate and support an operational executive protection unit. For distinct reasons, I will not comment on operational or technical areas out of respect and, most importantly, the safety of the men and women engaged in keeping their principals safe and secure on a daily basis. This episode is informational in nature and was developed for, compliance professionals, corporate security officials, and corporate executives. In reevaluating the proactive risk assessment approach, security solutions, and executive protection posture for leadership within their organization. The following are necessary considerations from a resource and organizational and administrative perspective in the form of questions, and these questions may be things that have already been answered that you don't need to answer to. Some of these questions are for units, departments that have been up and running for a number of years, and some not so much. So some of this information may not be applicable, and some may be exactly what you need. First of all, the first question that you would want to evaluate is, what is the public profile of your principal? Meaning, how recognizable is your executive? Do they do TV appearances? Are they frequent conference speakers? Are they in themselves a radio personality? Do they have a podcast? Are they engaged unordinarily at a high level in the public sphere? Number 2, what is the size of your organization? Is it large, medium, or small? What is your line of business within healthcare itself? What is that medical specialty? Number 3, who is responsible for executive protection in your organization? Is it outsourced to private contractors, or do you have an existing executive protection team, or is it within the corporate security structure of your organization? 4, what is the size of your executive protection budget? Does your organization have a separate line item for executive protection? If so, is the amount sufficient to appropriately support the safety of the principal? Many times in many organizations, security or executive protection, if one exists, is the first line item to be cut. Something that needs to be reevaluated in today's atmosphere. 5. What is the executive protection organizational tree? Where does it sit within that particular organizational structure? Once again, depending on the resources and the size of the organization, executive protection might not be a full-time independent branch within the organization. For example, some small organizations outsource executive protection duties to private contractors, or it may be within the compliance department, or it might fall back to corporate security. In either scenario, the manager responsible for executive protection should have a direct and unimpeded access to the principal or the principals being protected. Number 6, who is responsible for the communication when threats are received? Threat briefing should be attended by a senior member of the executive protection team. The language should be direct, unfiltered, to that individual that is the subject of the protection. It should be speaking of whether the threat is low, moderate, high-level threat, with sufficient information to support the threat assessment and a level of assignment. Number 7, does your organization have a hotline number? If so, how are inquiries tracked and triaged? One of the most important organizational components of any organization of any size is the establishment of a hotline number and or call center. Threats should be triaged as appropriate and communicated to the executive protection team within at least 1 hour. Also, a member of the executive protection team should have access to the hotline database 24 hours a day. Hotline staff should undergo annual training with regards to threat management triaging. Number 8, who monitors social media in your organization? Direct and indirect threats are plentiful on many social media platforms. The executive protection team should have a member who is equipped to train, evaluate, review, score, and disseminate social media information and threats to the appropriate employee within the organization. Number 9, who processes incoming parcel packages? The branch responsible for processing mail should also undergo annual threat assessment training to ensure they have at least an entry-level knowledge to recognize and triage threats via United States Postal Service or other postal services. Number 10, who is responsible for your principal's travel management, both domestically and internationally? The executive protection team should be directly involved in the early stages of executive travel to include airline, hotel stays, layovers, and types of engagement. Number 11, who is responsible for security threat briefings within your organization? Security threat briefings, as previously stated, should be conducted by a senior member of the executive protection team. This should be done once a month, or at a minimum once a quarter, or any time a principal is set to travel. 12, who is responsible for travel threat briefings in your organization? There should be a pre-travel and a post-travel threat briefing anytime your executive travels. 13, how often are principals briefed on security threats? Threat briefings are not only for the individuals, but for the stated industry as well. Even though your principal may not have received any credible threats that needs to be evaluated or disseminated letting them know what is going on in the industry is just as good and it's just as competent information that they must and need know. 14. Who is responsible for liaisoning with local or state law enforcement agencies in your organization? This is one of the most important elements of an executive protection mission statement and operating manual. Local law enforcement in most instances will have to be educated on healthcare industry and the type of threat actors that may seek harm against high-profile employees of the organization. 15. Who is responsible for evaluation and the dissemination of open source intelligence information and bulletins in your organization? Ideally, a member of the executive protection team will be the lead stakeholder within the organization for this task, but understand there needs to be input and communication with the legal department, corporate security branch, IT department, compliance, and other senior management officials. 16. What is the role of the executive protection manager at the interdepartment meeting roundtables and committees? Executive protection team and managers must have a functional role at roundtable meetings to ensure efficient and effective understanding of security threat management. 17. Who is responsible for updating the principal's emergency contact list? Typically, personal and executive assistants are responsible for this task, but please ensure that they coordinate appropriately with the executive protection team. 18. Who is responsible for overseeing the contract security vendors and alarm installers in your organization? The executive protection team should be aware of vendors and installers who routinely have access to the C-suite. Typically, the department that is responsible for physical security should coordinate as appropriate with the executive protection team. Finally, in 19, what is the retention period of threat-related information and data acquired by your organization? The executive protection team should have sufficient recall of recent threat communication, i.e., investigative reports, police reports, security incidents, media reports, personal incident reports, hotline communication, email communication for a period of time to ensure the appropriate historical analysis can be ascertained. This compilation and retention of information will require coordination with the IT, legal, compliance, corporate security, and other relevant stakeholders in the organization. As I conclude, it's very important to understand the evolving domestic, international, global threat, the world that we live in, and the ability to create, establish, maintain, reinforce a modern day 21st century executive protection team in knowing the tools they need to be successful. If you'd like more information, please reach out at info@texasoversight.com. Thank you and have a great day.